All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm back with another episode of the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Miguel Adorade from the MMA Museum. And we're going to talk today. We've talked about Powerslap before, what we think of it, so on and so forth. But today we're going to kind of talk about how Dana White has come out, and in a lot of ways is making Powerslap look like it's his priority over the UFC. So I wanted to ask you, Miguel, what is going on here? Is he looking for an out with the UFC? Why is this becoming a priority for him? And a priority on UFC's social media as well. What's going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah, it's gone beyond certain points. I think dignified or undignified, pulling out of this dog and pony show would have been the right thing to do 2 weeks into the TV season. But I think that what we're seeing a manifestation of Dana's ego here. He wants it, and I think that's what's important to him. He gets what he wants. I think I'm sure he says that. You know what I mean? It, you know, you, we followed him for 20 years. I talked to the man once at an event of mine that he showed up at way back when. Other than that, he's never had time or anything for me. But he's such a public figure. You do have a drawing and an idea of his personality, and I think this is his ego gone bad here. His ego, he's strong-willed. He always gets his way, kind of thing. And now here's something that didn't go quite his way, and he's just going to keep battering his head against it, for whatever reason.
Now let's talk a little bit about TBS to Rumble. Like you've been behind TV shows before. TBS to Rumble's a step down, right?
I certainly think so. I think any observer of media would say that. But Rumble showed it. I'm guessing Rumble got a few million views, and that's good for Rumble. I don't know. I've never been to Rumble. I don't know. I guess it's a competing to YouTube, but you know, I think you were on television, and now you're on basically a computer or a phone app. So I think it's a fall from grace. I think that would have been the first signal to most people. The TV executives at the end of the day spoke. They said, "Yeah, we're going to pass next time." Dana's still looking up, like, all right, then I'm going to invent something better than television to put this on. That's the kind of mentality you always get from this guy. If the TV people, they won't help me, I'll build something better than TV. That's the attitude of those A-type personalities. It's just gone wrong here. He's just missed it. He missed it. He thinks he saw something. It's not there. This is not a crossover, big deal. It's a horrifying, lowbrow, shock value kind of thing. And it's okay if you want to make your money that way, but don't pass it off as a league. And you shystered the Vegas commissions. I wish somebody in the government would launch an investigation over what it takes to approve a new sport for a boxing commission. Because now with MMA, bare knuckle, now all of a sudden those might be okay. That's good. Now Powerslap, what the heck? That's not a sport. So it's like this process of just adding another column on the spreadsheet, more licenses and stuff. The commission should be in real trouble for this.
Now, I assume that Dana and Lorenzo came out of pocket to put this on TBS. So how bad did it have to be for TBS to say no? We don't want you to pay us for another season.
Guys like that, they've got the money to do that, but they tend never to use their own money that way. So I think that's the other reason they double down is because they're not really experiencing any real loss. Just face, that'll eventually cost them a little bit if they keep, trying to force something down our throats that's, really unpalatable. But yeah, I don't think they're going for out of pocket for too much. And when you consider they may have made a $50,000 or $100,000 investment, that's not the same as me and you investing, $50,000 or $100,000. We have that. We might buy a house to live in. This guy could throw it away and he's not allowed to gamble in casinos because at some point he made enough money that he can decide to spend his own money at a higher rate than the guys monitoring the casinos high, No, it's like double down. All right, now we got a $15 million bet, and Dana will do it. Casino, because even the people that deal with the VIPs, there's a level, and he broke enough casinos that way by doubling down as to, be banned from gambling at some of them. I hear blackjack's his game. So anyway, and that's what he's doing here. Just keep doubling down. Like he's going to make his money back, or he's going to save face, or what's going to happen here? The Super Bowl is going to be on. Again, the football room in the casino was empty because of Powerslap. This is claims he's making, So the Super Bowl is going to be on, and the Powerslap comes on, and the Super Bowl's ratings are going to die. I don't know. There's nothing that could happen that would make this be like, all right, yeah, he was right. This is just a train wreck upon a train wreck upon a train wreck. He's wrong, and he doesn't want to admit it. This happens with type A's like that.
It's interesting you mentioned shoving the product down our throats, because I heard people saying that about Powerslap. You have Marab versus Jan last week. They didn't promote it at all. Powerslap was all over the UFC social media, YouTube,
they went further
Instagram.
Than that. I think
why are they doing this? I mean, I know you think Dana's contract, but does that say I can use the UFC's social media to promote whatever I want?
If he's in charge of social media, it does.
Yeah, I mean, that's
crazy. A lawyer interpreting it. There's a lawyer certainly interpreting it that way. I don't know if in the bigger powers of the company, there's somebody who would love to get rid of him and shut him down. But for whatever, maybe everybody loves what he's doing. Hey, he doesn't seem to operate as carefree. Like, he's not having fun anymore either. So I don't think the Endeavor stuff is like him operating with the Fertittas, where he can say something and the Fertittas will back him and make it happen. Even, there was no cracks in that armor, So he was able to make things happen with a lot of force in the old days, and operating like that with new bosses and stuff. Man, I'd be surprised if everybody there loves him. But they can't get rid of him, again, because of that contract. But let's go further on that power, because you said they use UFC employees. The Jan fight was at the old joint. You remember the joint venue when they were coming up in the UFC 40, that neighborhood? It was a nice venue in one of the Vegas casinos, and they did a few shows there. And then the casino moved on. It's remodeled 10 times since then. But the venue's still there with a different name, and that's where the fights were. They went back so they built a building so they could house all their fights, and then got a building. Not even somewhere like, okay, let's go to, let's take the show on the road again and do that. Right in their own town, where they have a building to do this. And they put Powerslap in the Apex Center. They make Forrest Griffin. I saw Mark Coleman catching people in this. So, yeah, he's pulling a lot of strings to make it happen in his way. But there's nobody who can say, that's it, Dana, you're cut off. No more Powerslap, you're done. You don't have a boss.
Yeah, but when you're the person who paid billions of dollars to buy the UFC, and you're like, hey man, we bought this, we didn't buy Powerslap. If you want to promote this, go do it on some Powerslap social media. The UFC social media is for UFC event. They can't even do that.
I would love to read Dana's contract of transition from Zuffa to Endeavor, because it's all in there. It's all in there. If they said something along the lines of, here are the lines, businesses, anything that brings in money, looking for alternate, ways of making the UFC. Dana didn't actually look really happy either. That time, everything gets forgotten so fast now, But remember that time Facebook took over the Apex, and there was a private show for Facebook? That may have been something that somebody, and the whole meta thing and stuff, that may have been something that they forced Dana to do. Because of the Facebook relation. Facebook is too big an entity to just walk in there and not have your biggest lawyers and your biggest stuff going there. And the UFC brought them aboard to do the whole meta aspect, that virtual, stuff that they've got going on there. I heard you had to buy goggles and stuff, so I don't know how big it's getting, but it was Facebook, and they paid attention. Dana, I think, played along. I don't know if that was him, So I think there are limits to that. But if they gave him power over social media, which he could have said, the owners of Endeavor, if they wanted him gone now, they should regret the day they didn't take that contract to the ringer. And I wonder what would have happened if they would consider it a showstopper, and if the Fertittas would have kept the company and kept it going. Because at the end of the day, Dana's claim to be the heart and soul of the UFC is true. At the end of the day, he built it. It's there. It's his from ground up. He put it on TV. It's not the way a lot of other people would have done it, and this, that, and the other thing. But it's about as big as it was ever going to be. He's definitely crossed over into that world and stuff. So they may have convinced Endeavor there's no way you can even continue without him. And that's what I think we're looking at here. Those types of deals always look shitty, 5-8 years down the line or whatever, where, you're like, okay, that's what giving him power over social media does. But yeah, he's mentioned the Fertittas. He's mentioned Campbell has been with him on the UFC, on the Powerslap broadcasts and things, So I don't know what that means. Does that mean that everybody at Endeavor loves this too? I don't think that's the case. But whatever it is, they can't stop it. And that's the contract. That's Dana's, saying F you to them via that contract.
Because you'd think they wouldn't be happy with the fact that, they bought the UFC. Dana White even said he hasn't been excited for the UFC in years. The John Jones match was the first time in several years that he was really excited going into a UFC event, which I think is crazy to say in the public.
Well, yeah, it's a little weird to say in the public, but at the end of the day, it's also, I think that's honest. You rarely probably see Dana being that honest, but I think you have no choice after, 15 years of seeing the fights and the whole spectacle of everything, and also the whole fireman aspect of fixing things and making it and taking an event from Vegas and moving it to Los Angeles and stuff. Like, we criticize that for what it really is behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, those types of moves are A-class, big-time moves. So he's always operated like he can do whatever he wants, and he hasn't stopped. Now he's getting to the point where, though, a lot of again, going back to the idea of the passion, he doesn't have the passion anymore. That's understandable. So don't try to tell me that you've replaced this passion with Powerslap.
It feels that way, though. That's what I'm confused about.
No, I think it's a nuance of his ego. I think he picked Powerslap, but it's him. I make the champions. I'm the guy that makes sports and makes the giant corporations and stuff. So he's counting on his it factor to take this thing and launch it and make it big. I don't think he ever had that moment. Maybe he saw a guy fall over one time on this thing and was like, "Holy Toledo, man, wow." But you're going to tell me that this guy, with the fights he's seen, is going to be overly excited over Powerslap? It just can't happen. The brain won't release the pheromones on. He's seen too many fights. He admits it. So Powerslap replaced that? Unfathomable. If it really did, then I got a question. Maybe we got lucky with him, and we would have been better off, with Bob Meyerowitz staying as the UFC president, because this guy just got lucky on here. But he's a clown. This is a fool move.
And it feels like Ari Emanuel, Endeavor, they don't have any hands on any of this stuff promoting the UFC. They have no visual, face.
Yep, they're counting money. I think that it was very simple. I think that it starts with that. Knock, knock. Hi, I'm Ari Emanuel. I got cash. You're Lorenzo. Call your older brother. Sit down. I'm buying the organization. And they say, okay, we're going to cash out a few billion. That's a good idea. Let's cash out. Go back, talk to them. Dana, we're cashing out. Oh, I don't want to cash out. Right? Because Dana could have retired at that moment too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your critical moment. But now, like I've told you offline, I'll say it here online for the first time. This is where that semi-mafia aspect occurs, where they have these conversations like heart to heart. Lorenzo, Dana, are you going to leave me with these guys? Are you going to sell me out to these guys? Let's get a lawyer and prepare a contract and tell them that basically the truth. Lorenzo wouldn't even need to lie. He would say the UFC would be nothing without Dana. You can't run this company without Dana. It's in his blood. And anybody who is going to try, it's going to be, 5 years before they're even close because of learning curve and stuff, because the guy's he's been doing it. And he's every time has been, from Spike TV to, the FX Sports and then Fox Sports and then, the deal with ESPN. And then, every step of the way has been moving and getting the sport in front of people. Every week, there's fights that are new, basically. It's not repeats and stuff. New fights every week, not tied to a schedule. The Dana genius is there to talk about what he did and keeping those relationships, that those relationships extend themselves to them being seen in Mexico on television. And which events there do they get on pay-per-view? Which events are distributed? Some they still use Fox Sports all over Latin America. So it would be very easy for them to say, look, and he's the guy that deals with all those relationships. You couldn't even, if he left, most of that, you wouldn't even have worldwide coverage anymore. And I don't know how that conversation went, but that conversation was had. You can't do this without Dana. You have to keep him. And Rami Emanuel or whoever are the decision makers at Endeavor bought it. You could make a case for it. And if the goal is to make money, yeah. If the goal was respect of the sport, you might have gone a different direction. They claim to love and respect the sport, but they don't. But that's what it is.
Yeah, maybe they get a cut of whatever Dana does. If he does Powerslap or whatever, then maybe they'll say, "All right, go do whatever it is you're doing." But if all I paid for was the UFC, I'd be pretty mad if Dana White was trying to build another organization. Do that on your own time. I'm paying you for this.
Yeah, that wasn't Dana like an owner at some point.
Yeah,
he may have kept an ownership share.
Yeah.
Who knows how that I would love to read that contract. I would love to read that contract, but if he still retains the power of an owner of decision making at that level, very few people are going to tell him anything.
It's crazy. Do you think they'll have 2 more seasons on Rumble and film in Fight Island and all that?
I had experience with Abu Dhabi, and I know that they have a passion and love for the sport. But I think money, and I think also the fact that culture also does like the freak show thing. I think that they'll do it over there. I wish they would say no. We got a country's image to uphold here, but I think it'll be an overriding factor. I think I had a chance to be in Abu Dhabi one time with guys that were pro wrestlers, known pro wrestlers, big dudes, giant dudes. And they walking through among the people there, those they've never seen anything like that. So I think if he wants to bring a freak show, that's what he's going to be bringing. He could call it. There's an ancient black and white movie called Freaks. That's disturbing, really, to watch with a modern context. You know what I mean? But I think that this is about as close to that. Dana's trying to recreate that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just for me, I just can't wrap my head around how this looks like I said, his priority, not the UFC anymore.
I think
his priority is building Powerslap.
Yeah, you're missing the point. It's because it's his.
Yeah.
Because when Dana says it is, and he's used to that, so that's what he's going to force down our throats. This almost reeks of, oh my God. Like, I think a scenario that's very plausible is that him and Campbell and these guys were actually watching Powerslap and making fun of it. Like, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. And Dana, on his ego, may have said, but I can make it a big. No, you can't. And now we're literally talking about trading places, the ancient movie with Eddie Murphy, where two rich men make a bet, and everybody else is playing along to see who wins that bet. All the power slappers, they're all, being abused. It's like, paid low, exploited, still none of them are really famous or breaking through or anything. So yeah, I think it has its aspect of them looking down on the masses too. Very arrogant. Because if you think about it, if they love the sport so much, why wouldn't they back like a great grappling league? Especially if they were willing to go all in every time, and lose a little money and stuff or whatever. But why is there not this type of support for a grappling league from these people? Because they don't love the sport. Because what they love is money, and here is an ego, and he's wrong. Here's the part. Here's the part that nobody in the UFC, none of the employees can ever say these words. Yeah, Dana's wrong. Yeah, Dana was wrong on that one. And not because he hasn't been wrong, but because to say that is death in a company like that because of the ego. And that's what it is. He's wrong about Powerslap, and nobody can tell him.
Yeah, and one other thing I think is interesting that I think you might find interesting, he was kind of comparing it to the early UFC and people saying how terrible it was or that it was human cockfighting. But I don't agree. There were a lot of us backing the UFC back then online and whatnot, and we kind of had a us against the world mentality. I don't know anybody that likes Power Slap. I've never met anyone who said, did you see Power Slap? Are you watching it? I don't know
That's why you
anybody.
have to be careful. That's why you have to be careful when Dana opens his mouth,
Yeah.
and then you just want to print what he says. The UFC did have a call to be banned in the UFC 2 with the Night of Elbows and stuff. It was it was something that there was a big reaction against it. I don't even see that type of reaction against Powerslap. I just see most people being like, yeah, the government kind of said, but most people are like, this isn't. The UFC also showed men fighting. And as far as I can tell from history, men fight. There will be fighting. If it's under a bridge in the modern times, they will be fighting. In the 80s, what was going on, before the UFC? In the 80s, you can find still lists in old magazines, top 10 toughest men in the world, guys. Interestingly enough, Bart Vale appears on some of those lists, So fighting, combat is very different than power slap. And fighting combat is something that man has thousands of years of historic record doing. You give me the results for those Greek Olympic power slap matches.
Yeah, there's no hieroglyphics of people slapping each other inside the pyramids.
There's absolutely no history at all. This is a construct of modern social media. And that's why, it should die that way too. But to compare it to the early UFC is, again, to say you love the sport and then not know the true roots of the sport, or not honor them. Is this sport, Meyerowitz went to court I don't know how many times, and Meyerowitz, for all his little points, was fighting alone. He was alone, but he really fought an honorable fight. Keep in mind, look. So they took an event from New York. It got banned in New York, and they moved it to Dothan, Alabama overnight. Obviously, a famous story. Okay, that could have been the end of any company, though. And would have been the end of most MMA companies. What MMA? He pulled it off. He finished. He got the bill at the end. He said, that's enough loss. I'm done. And what about Meyerowitz turn around and do? He did the ultimate next. Hoist didn't get signed because of whatever, but he did the best and biggest tournament he could. He had his heart in the right place. You're ignoring history to say that Powerslap is any similar, impetus. This is your ego trying to push it through, not a grassroots movement of people. The tap out guys that he loves so much. They probably, would be like, yeah, Power Slap's great. Make Power Slap shirts. At this point, they're a corporation or whatever. But those guys, they weren't moved by the UFC and their trials coming up because it's a gong show like Power Slap. No, that was a real fight for something that everybody knew should be a real sport, or else people will be doing it under the bridge. People die, people get messed up. It's better if it's governed and regulated and overseen by people. But that's been a fight, you consider boxing similarities since the 1700s. There's documented history all the time of combats going on.
Yeah. Even regional supporters, even regional promoters had to fight in the courts. I mean, TJ Thompson did that in Hawaii. I remember him having to go to court many times.
Yeah, the Indiana courts, tied people up there as well. And I'm sure Monty Cox has his court experiences. And, there were a lot of people in those early days that put in a little bit of it. But I don't think, a little bit to save the sport, to work the sport. But I don't think that can be compared to like the Power Slap, because those guys, the MMA and fighting, just call it fighting, is in the human texture. Because, if not, it would have been like, well, for the 40s to the 80s, there was nothing. I assure you that there were networks of people doing stuff, and the Carl Gotches and guys like that keeping knowledge alive, even if they had to go to Japan to do it. But there was always men that fight. And then, obviously with the military aspect and generals and things, it's more of a lifestyle thing. But this is simulated combat. It's a sport, but combat, and it goes down to one-on-one. But we've been doing it for thousands of years. The Greeks did it. We all knew about it. And when we all saw it, we were like, that's it. That's what we want to see, because it's better than boxing. It's more pure. What of that sentence, what could you repeat about that? What I just said, what could be repeated about slap fight? Nothing. No history. It's like, maybe find me a recording of people slapping themselves like this in the 50s, the 40s, or in a farm or somewhere, even the 70s, the 80s.
Yeah, it's not.
It has the fighting thing is in our blood and is in our history, and it always will be. It's become modernized in this MMA aspect and stuff, but it is what it is. Power Slap shares none of that.
Yeah, and Dana will never have to go to court for slapstick.
It would be great if he did. It would be great if somebody just, tied him up in court. I don't want anybody to get hurt, but like a PMRC of mothers. You remember the old PMRC? Got together and was like, Dana, no slap fighting. Like, mothers protesting outside the UFC complex, but that's the type of stuff doesn't happen to this guy. Like, I thought when he slapped his wife that the female fighters on the roster would have a voice, and nothing.
Yeah.
So he's got power, man. He's got power.
Well, I think it's a good thing to end on. Miguel, again, I appreciate you taking time to discuss this. And for everybody that follows the MMA Conspiracy Hour, appreciate it. Until the next time.
Thanks for listening, guys. And thank you, Todd.
Take care.